In 2022, Europe faced an energy nightmare. Almost 40% of its gas came from Russia, and overnight those supplies became a weapon. Gas prices exploded and governments panicked. But as the continent scrambled for answers, Belgium unveiled something almost unthinkable: a $7 billion artificial island built to reroute the future of European power. If this bold gamble succeeds, it could sever Russia's grip on the EU for good. But how does one island promise to change everything, and what could go wrong if it fails? Before the war in Ukraine, the numbers told a simple story. Russia supplied nearly 40% of Europe's natural gas, more than a quarter of its oil, and almost half of its coal. Pipelines stretched from Siberia to the heart of the continent, crossing borders and tying economies together. Moscow held the valve. European capitals, from Berlin to Budapest, depended on Russian flows to keep lights on, factories running, and homes warm through the winter. On February 24, 2022, that balance shattered. As Russian troops crossed into Ukraine, energy became a weapon. Suddenly, the gas that once arrived each morning with the reliability of sunrise was at the mercy of geopolitics. Russia slashed pipeline deliveries, first by half, then to a trickle. The Nord Stream and Yamal pipelines, lifelines for Germany and Poland, ran dry. Spot prices for gas soared to record highs. In some cities, bills quadrupled in a matter of weeks. Governments scrambled to secure emergency shipments of liquefied natural gas from the United States, Qatar, and Algeria. But tankers could not replace what pipelines delivered every day. The shock exposed a vulnerability that had been growing for years. Europe's energy system, built for efficiency, was suddenly brittle. Factories slowed or shut down. Politicians warned of blackouts. In the Baltic states and Central Europe, memories of past gas cutoffs resurfaced. The fear was not just economic, it was strategic. Energy could now be switched off with a phone call from the Kremlin. Brussels responded with a plan: Repower EU. The goal was clear: end the EU's dependence on Russian fossil fuels well before 2030. The path was anything but simple. It demanded a massive acceleration of renewables, new cross-border power lines, and a grid strong enough to withstand shocks. The North Sea, once just a patch of stormy water, was suddenly the focus of a continent's hopes. Across Europe, leaders understood the stakes. Energy was no longer just a commodity, it was leverage. Whoever controlled the flow controlled the future. The search for solutions became urgent, and the appetite for extraordinary infrastructure, projects once dismissed as too risky or expensive, grew overnight. The question was no longer if Europe could afford to change, but whether it could afford not to. 45 kilometers off the Belgian coast, a new shape is rising from the gray waters of the North Sea, a man-made island unlike any built before. This is Princess Elizabeth Island, a project that on paper sounds almost reckless. Billions of dollars poured into a patch of artificial land, battered by storms, surrounded by shipping lanes, and exposed to the full force of the Atlantic. Yet for Belgium and for Europe, it represents something far more than an engineering challenge. It is a gamble on independence, a bold answer to the question of who controls the socket when the world's energy is at stake. At the center of this gamble stands Elia, Belgium's high-voltage transmission operator. Elia is not a household name, but its decisions ripple across borders and economies. In the aftermath of the Russian energy shock, Elia did not just patch up the old system. It pitched something radical, a physical hub in the sea, designed to gather the raw power of North Sea wind and redistribute it, not just to Belgian homes, but to entire regions. The plan called for an artificial island anchored in 45 meters of water, serving as a switchboard for electricity, collecting, converting, and exporting energy through a network of high-voltage cables that could one day link half a continent. The location is no accident. The Princess Elizabeth Zone, mapped out by Belgian planners years before the crisis, sits at the crossroads of Europe's densest grids. The site is close enough to the ports of Zeebrugge and Ostend for rapid access, but far enough offshore to tap the strongest winds and avoid the crowded shipping lanes near the coast. Here, Elia envisions a new kind of power node, one that does not just feed Belgium but links to the UK, Denmark, and beyond, turning the North Sea into a shared energy reservoir for Europe's future. No other country has attempted an offshore energy island at this scale. The risks are obvious: cost overruns, technical failure, the unpredictable violence of North Sea storms. For a nation of just 11 million, the scale of the bet is outsized. But the alternative, as recent winters have shown, is to leave the fate of factories and families in the hands of foreign suppliers. By pushing ahead with Princess Elizabeth Island, Aliyah and Belgium are wagering that the future of power lies not in pipelines, but in cables, wind, and a bold leap into the unknown. The world is watching to see if this audacious answer can deliver what fossil fuels no longer can: security on Europe's own terms. Power from the North Sea does not travel in a straight line. It surges, fluctuates, and arrives in pulses, sometimes gentle, sometimes fierce. Gathering it, taming it, and sending it where it is needed most requires more than a cable. It demands a hub, a place where raw energy becomes something Europe's grid can actually use. At the heart of Princess Elizabeth Island, that is exactly what is being built: a central switchboard engineered to channel up to 3.5 gigawatts of offshore wind, enough to rival the output of several nuclear reactors. A systems engineer on the project describes it simply: think of the island as an extension cord with multiple sockets. Offshore wind farms scattered across the Princess Elizabeth Zone collect power from turbines through a web of cables operating at tens of thousands of volts, typically up to 66 kilovolts. These collector cables converge on the island, where transformers step up the voltage to the 220 kilovolt class, preparing the current for export. The process is relentless, precise, and entirely invisible to anyone standing on a Belgian street flipping a switch. But the real breakthrough lies in what happens next. The island is not just a pass-through for Belgian power. It is a platform for conversion, a place where alternating current is transformed into direct current using voltage source converters. This is a crucial step. Direct current travels farther with fewer losses, making it possible to send energy not just to the Belgian coast, but across borders to the UK, Denmark, and beyond. The switch from AC to DC is the difference between a local wind farm and a continental energy backbone. The choice to concentrate all this equipment on a single artificial island is not about showmanship. It is about scale, safety, and future-proofing. Housing massive transformers, switchgear, and converter stations on a stable platform in the sea means fewer scattered platforms, lower costs, and easier maintenance. Helicopters and boats can land at a dedicated harbor or helipad, bringing teams to service equipment shielded from the worst of the North Sea's fury. And as new technologies like hydrogen production or battery storage become viable, the island offers space to add them without rebuilding from scratch. Voltage classes matter here. Inside the wind farms, collector cables run at up to 66 kilovolts. On the island, transformers boost this to the 220 kilovolt class for export, tying into Belgium's 380 kilovolt backbone grid. For future international connections, the plan is to use high voltage direct current, likely in the 400 to 500 kilovolt range, matching the standards of Europe's largest submarine power links. This layered electrical architecture is what makes the island a switchboard, not just a landmass. It is the difference between a single wire and a socket board that can feed, reroute, or isolate power flows in real time. None of this is theoretical. The island's design is shaped by the demands of a grid that must absorb shocks, reroute flows, and balance supply and demand across borders. Without a central offshore hub, the alternative would be a tangle of separate platforms and cables, each limited by distance, each vulnerable to failure. Instead, Princess Elizabeth Island is engineered to gather, convert, and dispatch the North Sea's energy, turning a volatile resource into a strategic asset for an entire continent. April 2025. Two concrete towers, each nearly 60 meters high and weighing 22,000 tons, leave the Vlissingen yard bound for the open North Sea. Tugboats guide them through shipping lanes and past sandbanks heading 45 kilometers offshore. There, in water 45 meters deep, crews from TM Edison, Belgium's joint venture of DMA and Jean de Noul, lower the first caissons onto the seabed. These are the first of 23, forming a ring that will become Princess Elizabeth. At this depth, the sea is unpredictable. Currents pull at the massive structures, storms roll in with little warning, and the margin for error is measured in centimeters. GPS-guided cranes and specialized vessels work in tight windows between weather fronts. A single misstep can delay the project by weeks and cost millions. The caissons, cast in Vlissingen, travel nearly 100 kilometers before reaching their final position. Once in place, they will enclose a footprint of 5 to 6 hectares, enough to hold 8 football fields. Sand will fill the ring, raising new land from the sea, a foundation for Europe's energy ambitions. The challenge is not just engineering, it is also ecology. The North Sea is a protected habitat governed by some of the strictest environmental laws in Europe. The federal permit for Princess Elizabeth Island requires more than brute force. The caissons and their rock armor must double as artificial reefs, designed to attract oysters and mussels and to shelter marine life. Above water, the island will offer nesting sites for seabirds with restricted zones to protect wildlife. Every step is monitored: noise, turbidity, the presence of fish and marine mammals. Work is timed to avoid sensitive periods. Noise shields and soft start procedures are mandatory, giving dolphins and porpoises a chance to move away before heavy machinery starts. TM Edison engineers shape and texture the caissons to encourage colonization. Rock dumping is planned to create ledges and crevices for sea creatures. Sand filling is managed to avoid smothering fragile habitats. The island is both an energy hub and a marine sanctuary, a test of whether heavy infrastructure can coexist with a living sea. The price is steep. Civil works alone exceed 1 billion euros, but the cost includes years of environmental monitoring, compensation for lost sandbanks, and commitments to restore or enhance habitats. For Belgium, the investment promises energy independence and a new role in the North Sea. For TM Edison crews, every caisson placed is a marker of progress and a reminder that the line between engineering and ecology is razor thin. If this works, what happens next? $7 billion. That is the price Belgium is staking on Princess Elizabeth Island and the web of cables, substations, and offshore wind that will feed it. The civil works alone, just the concrete, steel, and sand, demand over 1.1 billion euros. To close that gap, the European Investment Bank stepped in with a 650 million euro green loan. Brussels secured a 100 million euro subsidy from the EU Recovery and Resilience Facility. When you add the grid infrastructure, high voltage hardware, 3 new offshore wind farms, and the international connectors that will tie Belgium to the UK and Denmark, the total investment reaches $7 billion. Rising prices for HVDC equipment and subsea cables have already pushed costs higher than early projections. Every escalation lands on the desks of regulators who must weigh the promise of energy independence against the reality of higher tariffs for homes and businesses. Debates in Brussels and Antwerp are not just about engineering, they are about risk, about how much the country can afford to stake on a single exposed asset in the North Sea. The financial gamble is immense, and with so much capital at risk, protecting the island and its cables becomes more than a technical issue. It is a matter of national security, and the eyes of both allies and adversaries are watching every move. In the North Sea, energy does not just flow, it can be cut. The sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines in 2022 and a string of cable attacks in the Baltic have made one thing clear: Europe's new lifelines are as vulnerable as the old ones. Power islands and undersea cables are now targets, not just assets. Like for Belgium, the lessons are immediate. Princess Elizabeth Island and its web of high-voltage cables represent not only hope for energy independence, but a new kind of risk, one that cannot be managed by engineering alone. The Belgian Navy and the Maritime Safety Administration have moved to harden this lifeline. Around the island, an acoustic shield of hydrophones listens for the scrape of anchors, the whine of underwater drones, and the telltale rhythm of trawlers drifting off course. Radars sweep the surface, tracking vessels that linger too long above critical cables. Cameras and docking stations provide eyes and access for rapid inspection. The Navy's new mine countermeasure vessels equipped with underwater robotics are ready to investigate and neutralize threats at depths up to 300 meters, far beyond the reach of most saboteurs. But technology is only part of the defense. The island's cables are buried beneath the seabed with burial depths tailored to the local risk. Redundancy is built in. Multiple export cables, internal bus bars, and transformer backups ensure that even if one line is cut, the island will not go dark. Maritime exclusion zones restrict unauthorized traffic, and every suspicious stop triggers an inspection. In Brussels, every incident in the Baltic or North Sea is a warning. Resilience is not an afterthought. It is the foundation for trust in a system that must withstand more than storms. Ambition on the North Sea is no longer just about national projects. In 2023, 9 countries gathered at the North Sea Summit in Austin and set a target that once seemed out of reach: 120 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030, scaling to 300 gigawatts by 2050. That is enough clean electricity to power hundreds of millions of homes, enough in theory to replace the entire fossil fuel footprint of a continent. Princess Elizabeth is only the beginning. European policymakers now talk openly about a network of artificial hubs and energy islands, each serving as a node in a vast offshore grid. The vision is bold, cables crisscrossing the seabed and connecting Belgium, Denmark, Germany, the UK, and beyond, allowing power to flow wherever it is needed most. The island's physical footprint is designed for more than just electricity. In the future, it could host hydrogen electrolyzers, turning wind into fuel that can be stored, shipped, or piped across Europe. An EU policy expert puts it plainly, this is a pilot for a new kind of European infrastructure, one that does not just keep the lights on, but redefines who holds the power. As the North Sea transforms into a shared energy reservoir, the question lingers. If this model works, how many more islands will rise from the water and how far could this new grid reach? Europe's next energy war won't be fought in boardrooms, but in the currents beneath the North Sea. As power grids grow more connected and more exposed, energy independence becomes both a shield and a target. Princess Elizabeth Island is more than an engineering feat. It is a test of how Europe defends its future. The stakes are not just electric, they are existential. What kind of power are we really building?